How's it going, everybody? My name is Bethel Dota, and I'm a 6K carry player and Grandmaster Morphling spammer, and today I'm bringing you an absolute monster of a Morphling guide. To be clear, I'll only be talking about the ebb facet in this video. Good old classic Agi hypercarry Morphling. The red facet just feels like an abomination to me. I've been playing Morphling long before the facets came out, and it's just not my thing, but if it is your thing, my friend SplitDip made a guide on that. Be sure to check that out if you want to learn flow Morphling. Morphling is the kind of hero that will leave you feeling like a future TI winner. I'm literally the best player in the world. I'm literally the best. Or utter despair. I am happy with these farming patterns right now, though. Caught up considerably well, I would say. Putting my nose down and doing stuff, you know what I'm saying? Scratch that. There's really no in between. This hero has the highest highs and the lowest lows out of any of the heroes I've played in Dota. We'll be starting simple and getting progressively more advanced as the video goes on. We're going way beyond the simple stuff, so be sure to watch to the very end. Also, I'm going to stop you before you run to the comment section and say, but Bethel, does this still work in 7.39? The answer is yes. I made sure to focus on principles that should stay relevant to Morphling as long as he's a hero in Dota 2. However, when it was necessary, I did do a little insert where I explained how I would tweak my build slightly considering the nerfs that they just gave to him in 7.39. Last thing I'll add is I do offer coaching for anyone who wants to listen to my ADHD rants about Dota 2 for a while and maybe rank up in the process. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video. So first up we have Waveform, and Waveform says, Morphling dissolves into liquid and surges forward, damaging enemy units in his path. Morphling is invulnerable during Waveform. Waveform attacks enemies in his path, does not apply on-hit effects. So that's fairly self-explanatory. You just click, and he dashes in a line, and it deals 50% of your attack damage as bonus damage to enemies you pass through. So some different text with that. You can cast abilities while you're waveforming, right? So if I do it like this, I can actually cast it sideways, and then it will cast it when I'm in range during the waveform. You can also cast items while waveforming, so I can waveform and scythe mid waveform. You can also TP while waveforming, so this is a really common thing you'll see Morphling players do to escape, is they'll waveform and TP while strength morphing. And yeah, you can TP while waveforming, fairly self-explanatory. So as stated on the tooltip, waveforming does make you invulnerable, so you can dodge projectiles and other things like that by waveforming into them. So if he casts Spear, and I waveform in, you can see that I am able to successfully dodge this Spear. Same thing with like Lion Spike. You can waveform into it to dodge it as well. Alright, so next we have Adaptive Strike. And Adaptive Strike basically damages and knocks back enemies depending on what stat you have more of. So if you have more agility, it's going to do most damage. So if your agility is 50% higher than your strength, it's going to do the maximum agility multiplier. If you have 50% more strength than you do agility, it's going to do the maximum knockback. So, see, that's quite a knockback. All right, then next up we have, of course, Attribute Shift. So Attribute Shift makes it so that you can turn agility into strength or strength into agility. It costs 10 mana per second, and the shift rate goes up the more points you put into it. Abusing this ability is the core of what makes Morphling strong, and we're going to talk about that all throughout this video, but I want to show you some basic things with Attribute Shift first. So a lot of people think that Attribute Shift works like tread switching, where it preserves the percentage HP you have when you morph, but this isn't actually the case. How this actually works is the bonus health that gets added when you morph from Agi to strength gets added to both your current health and your maximum health. So if I hit this Morphling once, all right, perfect. Now you can see I'm at 217. If I morph strength, it gave me current health as well as maximum health. And this is what makes Morphling so tanky. This also is what lets him literally create health out of thin air. So if we knock this guy down a bit lower, perfect. And if I morph all the way down to 0 health, right? And then I give myself strength, I literally am just creating health points out of thin air. So I was at 1 health point. Now I'm at 255 with 51 base damage, and let's say I had normal starting items, right? Then I'd be at 57 base damage. So you can use this trick to create health out of thin air. So there are a couple situations in which you want to do this. Number one is when you're regenning. The second situation in which this is helpful is, let's say you're running away and you have a window where you're getting chased where the enemy can't actually finish you off. What you can do is morph agi so that you lose your health, and then morph strength to gain health back. Those are the main attribute shift techs that we'll be talking about in this video. You can use these abilities while channeling anything. So if I use Meteor Hammer and morph into agi, you can see that I can still morph while channeling and it doesn't cancel my channel. Likewise, of course, you can always strength morph while TPing without canceling your TP. Pretty cool stuff. So one important thing about regenning in the fountain, let's say I'm low. When I go back to fountain, it's actually better. Let's say I'm getting chased, right? Let's say I'm low, I'm getting chased by this guy, I'm TPing home. You actually want to keep as much strength as you can while you're healing, because the fountain gives you percent HP regen plus your base regen, which will be increased the more strength you have. So you'll actually full heal in the fountain faster if you are morphed and have more strength instead of the other way around, right? So if I TP home and immediately start to morph down, I'm actually going to heal my health pool slightly slower if I'm morph full agi than if I'm morph full strength. This isn't terribly useful. It doesn't save you tons of time, but in more intense games where you're TPing fountain and then you immediately have to take a fight outside your base that you need to be to immediately, or let's say you took a fight in your base and you have to heal and go right back out, this can help save some extra valuable time off of your ability to return to the fight. The other little tip with attribute shift is if you're ever going to pick up a shield rune, you want to make sure that you morph as much strength as you can before picking it up, because shield runes scale based on your max HP. So if I take this, I'm going to have 1400 shield, and then I can morph all of my agility back. And boom, I have effectively 1700 health, but I'm maxed out on agility. Very, very powerful rune on Morphling. All right, now let's talk about the buggiest spell in Dota 2, and that is Morph. So it says Morphling changes his form to match the targeted enemy. Gaining their basic abilities can be toggled for the duration of the ability. As of the current patch, this lasts for 36 seconds if you have the plus 12 second morph duration talent. So before you have the talent, it will last 24 seconds. I believe the current patch is 7.38c, just for future reference for people watching this video. So when I morph into this lion, for example, my primary attribute doesn't change. The only thing that changes about me is I get his non-ultimate abilities and I copy his movement speed before boot bonuses. So right now I have 319 movement speed. My Morphling base movement speed is 313. So I actually get a little movement speed by morphing into lion. Now in the past, it used to be that when you morphed into a hero, your primary attribute would actually change. And this felt really bad for Morphling because he basically stopped getting as much value out of items like Vladimir's and butterflies, because if you morph into somebody, you would become an intelligence hero, and thus these items would be worth much less on you. In the current iteration of Morphling, this isn't the case. So if I'm morphed as lion, I'm still agility. This has completely changed the way that certain interactions work. Like, for example, Outworld used to be kind of a rough matchup for Morphling, but now Morphling can just morph into him. He's still an agi hero, but now he has Arcane Orb. And so Morphling does incredibly well against Outworld because of that. If they ever change that without significantly doing something or compensating to some other area of Morphling's kit, he's going to fall off really, really, really hard in my opinion. And again, the patch that I'm on right now for future reference is 7.38c as of May 20th, 2025. So some other interesting interactions. So if I morph into an illusion, I turn into the main hero. And this is really, really good for certain heroes where maybe they're not as good positioning their illusions as they are their heroes, so you can easily morph into them. Now keep in mind, if the primary hero has Lincolns, if you cast morph on the illusion... Bruh. When did this change? Now when Morphling uses morph on an illusion, he turns into whoever created the illusion. So if I morph into this illusion, I turn into Terrorblade, I can use all of his abilities, and it's all good. However, let's say Shadow Demon creates illusions of Terrorblade. If I morph into an illusion, I'm actually going to morph into Shadow Demon. So that's something to be very aware of if you're playing against a Shadow Demon. So some other interesting interactions with Morphling. If you morph into a target and then you morph out and back in, right? So if I morph into Invoker, I can switch back and forth. When I switch back into Invoker, I gain new levels of his abilities if he leveled them while I was morphed as my hero. And let's say he invokes a new spell. if I morph back into Invoker, I now get the new spells that he morphed as well. So if you're playing against an Invoker and you're really thoughtful about your timings, you can kind of morph back and forth between him as he casts spells throughout the fight and use his spells. It's usually not worth it. It costs too much of your mana pool, and they're usually higher impact morphs in the match, but it's something that you should be aware of, right? So if you want to get new spells as he casts them, you can morph in and out. Maybe he even casts Ghost Walk to get away and you need to get away. You can morph in and out and then get Ghost Walk and run away. Some other tips: don't morph into Huskar unless you want to lose your entire mana pool. Because of Huskar's innate blood magic, you literally lose all of your mana. And you don't get it back when you morph back into your hero, so don't do that. This also, of course, works with Rubik. So let's say I morph into Rubik and I get Hex, right? Let's say he grabs another spell. So we'll do that. Grab that spell. If I morph back to Morphling and then back to Rubik, I now have Shackles and Hex. So really cool stuff. It's important, though, to keep this in mind, because let's say Rubik has stolen spells that you really want to hold on to. You want to be careful about going back and forth, because if the Rubik swapped away from a spell that you really need, you won't have it anymore. So if you really need it, you want to try to stay in your morphed form and use that ability before morphing back to your hero. Very complicated, but I hope that makes sense. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when I morph into a hero, I get their facet and their innate. So let's just say we're going to orbital strike myself. I am an invulnerable chicken, the stupidest innate in the entire Dota game. But I did just get saved by that innate, so that's pretty cool. I also turn people into chickens when I right-click them every few seconds, because if that is the facet that Shaman has selected. Okay, so let's talk about Aghanim Scepters and Aghanim Shard upgrades with Morph. So if I morph into a hero and I have Shard and the enemy does not, I get the Shard version of their ability if it's basic. However, if the Shard upgrade from the hero that I morph into is a new ability granted by Shard, I don't get that ability unless my target also has Shard. So if I morph into Bristle, you can see no Goo Ball. However, if Bristle buys Shard, I morph back into Morphling and then back into Bristle. Voila, I now have Goo Ball. So bonus abilities supplied by Shard are only granted if the target also has Shard, but upgraded versions of the basic abilities work if only you have Shard and the target doesn't. This interaction is the same for Aghanim Scepter upgrades as well. So now I need to talk about some other caveats to this. So Slark Shard, for example, says creates a cloud at the target location. All allies inside the radius are hidden and affected by Shadow Dance. So if I steal this and use it, it does absolutely nothing. The reason being that Morphling steals non-ultimate abilities and I don't have Shadow Dance when I cast this. And because the spell specifically states the people inside are affected by Shadow Dance, it does nothing. However, for whatever reason, this is different when we're talking about Ursa. So Ursa's Shard says applies a 1.4 second enrage on Ursa when cast. So if I morph into Ursa with Shard, I do get the enrage. Maybe somebody smarter in the comments can tell me something spaghetti code. I have no idea. So some important things to be aware of: if I morph into Terrorblade, I use meta. I morph into my hero and morph back into Terrorblade. Meta goes away and it's on cooldown. So if you want to be using meta, don't switch back into your hero. Some other similar interactions are like Lone Druid Spirit Bear, where as long as I stay as Lone Druid, I have the Spirit Bear, but if I morph into Morphling, Spirit Bear just croaks, and if I go back, Spirit Bear is on a 2-minute cooldown. So as for Morphling's Aghanims, it's absolute trash in its current state, but you do want to pay attention in the future. This could change. He has had some really broken Aghanims in the past, like when he could morph into allies, or when Morph just straight up took 20% of the target stats plus like 70 attack speed if it was Agi. But in its current state, basically what it does, it creates an illusion when it's on alt cast. The illusion can use abilities, and when you use replicate, it swaps positions with the illusions. I don't know. It's very complicated to use, and I don't see why you would rather try to micro this thing than just morph into the hero yourself. It's utter trash. Nobody buys it. Don't use it. All right, so jumping into the guide. First, we have starting items. Morphling starting items are extremely straightforward. Wand is just too good of an item on Morphling, and he loves stats so much that the best build by far in the current patch 7.38c is Wand plus 3 branches. This is the build I would recommend going over any other. The other ones are only good if you plan to build a Wraithband in the lane, but in the current patch, I would just go this starting build. However, if Wraithband does get better in the future and you are in a lane where spell spam isn't as common and you're going to need armor instead, you can go a Wraithband build instead. But right now, Wand and 3 branches is just too good on Morphling, and the stats back this up. So starting items according to Dota 2 Pro Tracker, these are the 3 main builds that people do. The stick, circlet, and tango has a 49.9. The double circlet into slippers has a 49%, and the wand 3 branches has a 53.8% win rate. So there's a 4% win rate difference in going the wand 3 branches. So just do that build. All right, really quick, let's talk about when to pick Morphling / counters. So Morph is countered by any forms of anti-regen. So Ancient Apparition, Spirit Vessel, Doom, Venomancer I would say is a soft counter to Morphling. Slark is good because you can just avoid getting hit by Morphling. If they have even games in terms of farm, I'd say Slark pulls ahead. Anti-Mage, only if he plays the fight properly, he can burn all of Anti-Mage's mana. Terrorblade is an illusion hero. Morphling is mostly single target, and Reflection destroys Anti-Mage because the Reflection illusion is all base damage. Shadow Shaman is not a hard counter, but he's a fairly soft counter to him. Any forms of like lots of disable, very hard for Morphling to deal with. Night Stalker is also a great counter. Beastmaster, Bane, these heroes that have really obnoxious, long-lasting ultimates that force you to morph all your strength before or die. Axe, if he calls Morphling, he usually just dies full 0. Riki's Smoke Cloud is a good counter to him. Now, in terms of when to pick him, he's good in most games when he's a strong hero. But he's particularly good against low lockdown drafts and heroes whose own spells counter themselves or are very powerful attack modifiers like Viper, Outworld, Razor, Jug for the spell immunity and the healing ward, Lifestealer for the spell immunity, Timbersaw's Whirling Death counters himself, things like that. All right, now let's talk about the Morphling ability build in 7.38c. This is probably one of the main things that changes the most from major patch to major patch with Morphling. So in the future, don't necessarily stick to the advice in this guide. Go ahead and go to Dota 2 Pro Tracker and see the skill builds that pros are doing. Look at guides on YouTube, see what's good on the hero. But this is the build for Morphling in the current patch. There are really 3 main styles of ability builds. So no matter what build you're doing, you're always going to start attribute shift, obviously, so that you can morph down to full agi when you're entering the lane. You have most attack damage. And in every single version of the build, you're going to get waveform at level 2 and level 3. From there is where things start to differ. So at level 4, you can either take stats, like in this version, or you can take a second point in attribute shift. The only reason you would want to take a second point in attribute shift is if you need to be able to morph faster to survive the enemy laning duo going on you. This is fairly common, and honestly for most players, especially if you're just learning the hero, I would recommend taking a second point in morph at level 4. It makes it a lot easier to stay alive. If you don't have a second point in morph in laning phase, you have to be more aware and proactive with strength morphing. So if you're new to the hero, highly recommend just get another point in morph at level 4. Level 5 is obviously waveform again. If you didn't get level 2 morph, you get it at level 6. Otherwise, you just get stats or ultimate only if you're in a lane where the morph target can net you guys a kill, or you hard counter the hero that you're laning against once you hit level 6. So a good example of this is like Razor, where you morph into him at level 6 and you static link him, and you can usually full 0 him. Sometimes what I'll do is I will hold a point when I hit level 6 to see if they overstep and somebody goes on me, then I can morph into a hero, especially if they have a stun, and get a turnaround kill. But most of the times, I'm just farming and I'll get a point in attributes. Level 7 is when you max waveform. You should have your 4th point in waveform at level 7. From there on out, in almost every single version of the build, it's attributes every single level. So Morphling has 7 total points to be put in attributes. You want to have 4 by level 12 if possible. If you didn't skill ultimate at level 6, I highly recommend getting it here at level 12. You can see that both builds that didn't get it at level 6 got it at level 12. Or in this case, it's attributes all the way to 15. 15 is the next big power spike. And you're going to want to make sure that you get the waveform level 15 range. And at level 15, in all the builds, you're going to get the waveform plus 250 waveform range talent at level 15. This is an incredibly powerful talent. It makes you that much more escapable and lets you initiate from a further range. It just is an insanely good talent for the hero. In this version of the build, this person got a 3rd point in attribute shift at level 14. My guess is because they figured out that, hey, I actually need to be able to morph even faster. They're killing me so fast that I need a 3rd point in 14 instead of extra attributes at 14. So you can always keep that in mind and hold that loosely. Then after that, you either get more stats or another point in your ultimate at level 16. This build at the bottom is probably the least common. I wouldn't recommend getting the 3rd level in your Morph at level 25, but these are the most common styles that I could find that match basically every Morphling approach to a match. And keep in mind, these are all guides from players who are at least 7,500 MMR or above. And then level 18 is where you either take your final point in attributes or you take your level 10 talent, which is either magic res, or if you're against really good heroes to morph into, the morph duration is better. And we're going to talk about that in a later section of the video. Finish out your build at later levels. But this, in the current meta, is the best skill build up for Morphling. The reason you get so many attributes is because of his innate, right? His innate gives him bonus agility. When you put points in attributes, if we pair that with our butterfly, we're going to have a huge power spike. Our goal is to have max attributes by the time we get butterfly. So quick change to this for 7.39. I think they nerfed the morph rate way too hard. So you need to get level 2 attribute shift at level 4, and you need level 3 attribute shift before you can think about taking team fights with your power spikes. So that will delay some of the timings on the attribute points, but overall the build should stay the same. All right, moving on to basic itemization for 7.38c. So you have a couple main variations of laning items. So in the lane, right, you're starting with 3 branches. You either get the Elven Skin first, and then build it into Treads and then Morbid Mask. This is kind of your default go-to autopilot build, but sometimes you're against heroes where Boots of Speed is a must. So in lanes like Dawnbreaker, Pudge, Centaur, Slardar, Mars, Legion Commander, Tidehunter, Axe, the main thing that all these offlaners have in common is they all rely on positioning to kill you. So Centaur, right? He wants to run at you and hit you with Hoof Stomp and Double Edge. Mars wants to hit you with a spear that you can dodge if you have faster move speed. Slardar wants to run you down with Bash. Pudge obviously rots you and slows you down after he hooks you. Dawnbreakers, both of her abilities are heavily positioning based to hit you. Axe's Call and Counter Helix. Tidehunter's Anchor Smash. All of these things are very, very hard to play around if you don't have Boots of Speed. I didn't know this for the longest time, and I couldn't figure out why I just kept throwing lanes that felt like they should be favorable. And the answer is simply I wasn't starting Boots. The enemy would get Boots, and they could land their spells on me almost every single time. So those are the 2 main laning buildups that you're going to look at. The other really important piece of advice is to make sure that you're buying extra sets of regen, extra sets of tangos if you need them in the lane. Ideally, your support will provide them for you, but that's not always the case. Once you burn through your first set of tangos, it's always a good idea to get more regen. Morphling abuses regen so hard, and you get so much more value out of it than your opponents. Moving on, I want to talk about raindrops really quick. So against Zeus and Nature's Prophet, raindrops are a must-buy. The reason being that if you get hit by a Nature's Prophet ulti or Zeus ulti randomly in the early game, you could just straight up die. If you have raindrops and you're being aware of it, raindrops protects you from just dying out of nowhere from these heroes. And that's one thing that you really need to do in the early game to preserve Morphling's game. You really want to make sure that you have a decent early game, you don't have any silly deaths, and you're able to farm pretty well into the mid game. The other scenario that makes raindrops really good, Medusa in the current meta, when she's off lane, she spams Snake on you. It's just too strong to deal with, and it saves you from having to buy more regen if you get a raindrop. The other main reason that raindrop is good is it lets you tank a spell and then man up after. So for example, Mars has only 1 magic damage spell in lane, and that is his spear. If you eat that damage with raindrop, afterwards you're more healthy than you would be without the raindrop, and you can man up on them. So this is the way I think about raindrop on most agility carries is, do they have 1 spell where as long as I can tank that spell, I'm able to man up and kill them after, then it's a good raindrop game. So for example, Tusk, right? Ice Shards is a pretty high damage spell, but it's the only magic damage spell he has. And if you can tank that, be healthy enough to man up on him after tag team, you're in a pretty good spot. Pugna is another hero like Medusa where you're just going to spam Nether Blast on you over and over again and waste your regen. And it's a hero that you could potentially man up on if you eat an extra Nether Blast or something like that. I can't describe the amount of times that buying a raindrop has secured me a kill against heroes like this, where if I didn't have the raindrop, I would have straight up died. The same goes for heroes like Terrorblade and things like this. All right, moving on to standard item progression. We're going to talk about more advanced item progression later on, but these are the main go-to item builds in the current patch. Obviously, there's more that goes into Morphling's itemization depending on the situation that you're in, but we really have to look at specific case studies to explain when you should differ from these main builds. So this build right here is the ideal Morphling game build. You go Wand, you go Treads, you go Vlad's, you go Manta, and then you go Butterfly, and then you go BKB. Vladimir's is extremely strong on Morphling. It gives him lifesteal, so he's able to sustain his health. He can just run into the jungle when he's low, click them a couple times to heal up to full. It gives him bonus damage, and Vladimir's bonus damage only works off of base damage, and because Morphling is all base damage, because all of his damage comes from his agility, Vladimir's is one of the strongest items in the game on Morphling specifically. Morphling is probably the best Vladimir carrier in Dota right now. It also gives you mana regen, which Morphling really wants so that he can spam waveform in lane, and it gives you armor. It's just an all-around super strong item on Morphling. Then Manta, obviously, super important for dispelling abilities later on in the game. It also lets you split push waves. Morphling's one of the best Manta carriers in Dota because, again, Manta illusions don't get bonus damage. They only get a percentage of your base damage. And because, again, Morphling's all base damage, Manta is very strong on Morphling. Even in fights, your Manta illusions hit pretty hard. Then we have Butterfly. I made a whole video explaining why Butterfly is so overpowered on Morphling, but essentially it pairs very well with his innate. His innate gives him so much bonus agility. And then the Butterfly bonus base attack speed snowballs very quickly with all that agility. So it's an incredibly powerful damage item on Morphling. It makes him farm faster, and it makes him super overpowered in fights for multiple reasons. For one, you have the damage. For two, you have the bonus attack speed when turning into heroes like Outworld or Slardar. For three, you have the evasion, and lots of times by that point in the game, you're tanky enough that if the enemy doesn't have a lot of spellcasters, you can evade through most of the attacks from the enemy carries. So many reasons Butterfly is good, and then BKB just lets you stay alive and do your thing. So going on to this next build here, we have Lincoln's into Manta, into Butter, into Satanic. This build is mainly your go-to against heroes like Legion Commander, Beastmaster, or Doom. So heroes that you have to have a Lincoln's response to, or you're just going to die every single fight. So Beastmaster Roar is going to screw you over. If you manage to survive, you're going to have to morph full strength and you're out of the fight. Duel, obviously, if you get dueled, you're going to die. And then Manta, fairly straightforward. You get this for the same reasons. They're strong on Morphling. They let you farm faster. They let you dispel abilities. Butterfly, still strong on Morphling for the same reason. And then Satanic helps you in those games where you're threatened by those spells. So for example, like Legion, let's say they break your Lincolns and they get a duel off. If you're able to pop Satanic before, you're going to survive the duel. Even if you aren't, the lifesteal from Satanic passively might let you sustain through the duel. It also lets you heal up after you, let's say you get hit by a Beastmaster Roar. You can potentially pop Satanic after and heal up. It's a very good item. The third build that I'm actually going right now a lot of times where Silencer's meta, where Ancient Apparition is meta, things like this, is Vladimir's into Manta, into Hurricane Pike, into Disperser. So these are games where BKB doesn't really do that much for you. Like they have a lot of abilities that you're worried about that pierce BKB, and just being able to reposition away from those abilities and dispel them again with Disperser is stronger than getting a BKB because Disperser has a lower cooldown than BKB. The Hurricane Pike, I've also noticed that pro players will get this against abilities that really mess with their positioning. So think like Nature's Prophet Sprout is a big one. Tusk Shards is a big one. Underlord Pit, I've seen a lot of Hurricane Pike purchasers for that. So any of these heroes that are like heavily, they throw down some sort of annoying AoE ability. Against Ancient Apparition, it's also good. You can use the Pike to dodge AA ult. This is what the Pike is for. And then the Disperser is just extra dispels. Obviously, it also pairs very well with Morphling's Manta style because you have illusions that burn a ton of mana and it gives you tons of agility. So very strong there. All right, so real quick update to this item build for 7.39. I don't think the item build changes much. None of Morphling skills or his innate got changed, so I think Butterfly's second item is still the go-to. However, I think Eye of Scotty could be very strong on Morphling because they made it now so that it gives 35 all attributes instead of less attributes with bonus health and bonus mana. Very value on Morphling. This could become a core Morphling item, and I will be experimenting around with it. You should give it a try in your games as well. Remember, Scotty is primarily an anti-regen and anti-ranged carry item. It's also good in games where your main goal is staying alive instead of doing damage. All right, moving on, let's talk about Morphling laning basics. So there's some essential things that you want to be aware of on Morphling in lane at all times. And you'll see these come up so often in your games. Some of these apply to carries in general. Some of these apply to just Morphling. So laning basics, click people a lot. Don't give up your health for free. So one thing I see a lot of Morphlings do when they struggle in the lane is they don't use the fact that they have very high base damage. Yes, people are going to harass you. You want to make sure when you can, if it makes sense, don't do it when there's a bunch of enemy creeps nearby. But if somebody's harassing you, you want to harass them back. You use regen better than they do. You can literally create health out of thin air by using attribute shift. You don't want to give up your health for free. So if someone starts harassing you, harass them back. It's very important. Morphling's laning phase is very much war of attrition. You're trying to not lose the regen game and to chip them down by right-clicking them a bunch until you're able to all-in them and kill them with waveform. You want to morph down before you use regen. We're going to show examples of this, but you want to morph down, deplete all your strength before popping a wand or a tango. One tango, one good 20 charge wand will heal you to full. Start clicking the support when they 2v1 your support. We're going to show examples of this again, but just keep in mind, anytime the enemy heroes go all in on your support, you want to start chipping down on the enemy support. The reason you want to do this, oftentimes you can just click them down the whole time they're going on your support and then wait for them to get a return kill, in which case you feel really good about that trade. You want to use waveform to harass when the opportunity arises. So you want to use waveform to both secure creeps and harass if the opportunity arises. I wouldn't use waveform just to secure creeps in most situations, because when waveform is down, you're fairly vulnerable. But if the opportunity arises to secure creeps and harass somebody with waveform, you want to do that. You want to think about the spells that you're against and manage your health accordingly. This is one thing that just takes a ton of time, and you're going to screw this up a lot while you're learning Morphling. Let's look at some examples of this. So let's say you're against Lion and Mars. You walk into lane at level 1. You need to be aware that they could potentially have 2 stuns. This guy's always going to scale Earth Spike. This guy will often scale God's Rebuke, his shield smash, but not always. You need to be aware that they could hit you with 2 stuns. So you need to make sure that when you walk into a lane like this, you're playing on enough strength to survive getting bursted until you know that they don't have 2 stuns. So for example, let's say that Lion stuns you and this guy uses Shield Crash. You know that until he hits level 2, you don't have to worry about 2 stuns. So you can play on lower health than you would if you knew they had 2 stuns. In a lane like this, where it's like Bristol Silencer, they have no stuns. So you can play fairly aggressive. You can play on low agi almost as much as possible. You just have to be careful that you don't get silenced with Last Word at a bad point when you can't strength morph. But again, this just comes down to a lot of practice and knowing your matchups. Generally, heroes that don't have stuns are much better for Morphling to play against. He can chip them easily without feeling that threatened. He can play on much more damage than he'd otherwise be able to. With that being said, let's start jumping into some gameplay examples of the things I've talked about. Okay, so in this example, Satanic is playing Morphling. He's going to block the wave because the enemy is trying to block his and he doesn't want to end up under tower. Unfortunately, he's not successful. Now, I want to point out that we learned some very important things from that one interaction in terms of playing Morphling. So, Satanic knows that Boxy skilled Snowball level 1. So, Snowball is a stun that's very easy to anticipate in terms of strengthening Morph. And Brewmaster doesn't have a stun. So, he can be fairly carefree and he can play on lower strength than he might otherwise be able to against a team that had like 2 stuns level 1. But he knows that there's only Snowball. He doesn't have to worry about Ice Shards. And so that kind of affects what he's going to do here in a second. So he's going to try to CS under tower. Can be kind of difficult. Even pros miss last hits. But he gets 3 out of 4, which is good. So as soon as that creep dies, he starts lowering all his health to Agi. He knows that Tusk skilled Snowball, right? He knows that Brewmaster can't kill him, so he's not going to get sniped by Ice Shards, so he's safe to do this. And he swaps all of his stats-giving items out of his backpack, morphs down to max agi, and then gives himself tons of strength, 185 out of 318. The backpack swapping is more advanced. I don't recommend you start trying to do that if you're not super quick. That's something you should worry about way down the road when you have more experience with Morphling, and you can kind of put the other things on autopilot. This will probably just distract you, cause you to lose creeps, cause you to die, stuff like that. But if you're quick about it, go for it. One tip with that is swap all your stats items into the same backpack slot. So now let's watch this next wave. Because it got pushed under their tower, it pushes into their tower, obviously. And so he's going to try to contest these creeps. Now notice that he's not clicking Brewmaster here, right? He has 3 creeps in his face. If he clicked Brew here, he would take a bunch of harass from the creeps. But watch when he does. Okay, so the wave meets. He now has a double wave. And then as soon as Brew goes up to get the range creep, he clicks him. Both AA and Morphling click him. And it's very much a battle of attrition on Morphling. You're trying to chip people down until they're low enough to kill them by committing waveform. So they did some pump fakes back and forth there. And he's still trying to contest Brew's creeps under tower, which is very important. If you're not against stuns, it's not like Tusk and Brew are stronger than Morph and AA level 1. So he can kind of sit here and mess with Brew's CS. Now, going back again, I think other players, even myself, might aggro right here. The reason he doesn't is he wants to contest this range creep. And if he aggroes right now, the whole wave is going to start hitting him in the face, and he's going to take a bunch of damage for trying to contest that range creep. So he doesn't get the deny, but at least he's able to contest it. And again, same thing. See, every single time, as long as there's not a bunch of creeps in his face, every time Saberlight comes up, Satanic is clicking him. Beautiful play there by Satanic. There's a little bit of misplay by Saberlight. It's insane the level these guys play at. So remember we talked about use waveform to harass when possible. Other players, even myself, might start trying to attack this creep, but Satanic knows he just hit level 2. He can secure it with waveform and harass Saberlight. So watch this. Instead of clicking the creep, he clicks Saberlight. So does Ducalis. He waveforms in, and he hits Saberlight. And I believe they get a kill here. Yeah, they get a kill just like that, and that's all set up because Saberlight walks up to the creeps, and he waveforms through the creeps to secure it and harass instead of just trying to click the creep. Now, another thing that's happening here, right, is again, this is a very low-stress Morphling lane. He's getting snowballed, so he can anticipate that stun, but even then, they don't have enough damage, even though he didn't strength morph at all before the snowball. So they get the first blood. They tip Boxy and Saberlight. Now again, he's playing here at 1 HP, but he knows the hero's limits. He knows that Boxy has snowball, so he's not going to get sniped by ice shards. And again, he just created HP out of thin air by morphing all the way down to 1 HP and then morphing strength. Now you're going to watch another dynamic that I talked about. This will show up in your games, and it's still showing up in a pro game, right? Watch what happens when Satanic walks forward. They snowball onto Ducalis with tag team. Instantly, the two of them use their spells on Boxy, not Saberlight. They're not going to kill Saberlight. He's way too tanky. But Morphling immediately runs over, starts clicking Boxy like crazy. Ducalis harassed him as well, and together they're able to secure a kill, a support for a support, which is heavily favorable to Satanic because he's a much stronger laner than Brew. So if he gets early gold and early lead, he's going to be able to kick Brew out of lane here fairly soon, and we're going to see that exact same thing happen. So again, he knew the hero's limits, he knew he wasn't at risk of dying, and he knows that, hey, if they're 2v1ing my support, I'm just going to click the other support to the farm. So, and you're seeing the exact same thing here. He's not going to let Saberlight get anything for free. He's going to keep clicking him, right? Especially because he has creep advantage. So there's only 1 creep of the enemies and 3 creeps of his, so he's not going to take a bunch of damage from creeps. Now, one thing I noticed here that I do poorly is I over-prioritize playing on max agility and healing when I shouldn't necessarily at that exact moment. So when I was watching this, I was so confused. I was like, he's playing on pretty low agility right now, all things considered. And I think this is for 2 reasons. 1, this is so that he doesn't get bursted. For 2, there's creeps here that he needs to contest, so he doesn't really have time to walk away from the creep wave and heal. And 3, he still has 64 base damage, even though he's playing on this much strength. Now you'll notice in this situation, right, he doesn't waveform through the creep. Why is that? Well, we know that Boxy's level 2, so they have snowball and ice shards. And Saberlight has a lot of damage as well now. I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with Brewmaster builds, but the basic concept is there. If he waveforms through this creep, he has no waveform to get away. So when they snowball him, they're going to take all his health away, and he's going to be kind of out of commission for a little bit while he has to go and regen. Instead, he just clicks both of them. Still manages to secure the creep. And look at this. He's not letting any creeps go unpunished. He's constantly clicking him. Again, here they have no kill threat on him, so he's just sitting up there throwing right clicks and contesting their creeps and being a total nuisance. Now, the reason it's important to play like this is it forces Boxy to stay in the area. So if you say, okay, whatever, I'm just going to let him have the creeps under tower. For 1, not only are you not contesting his farm, but for 2, Boxy is free to go mid because his Brew is not under pressure, which is griefing your lane and your mid lane. This might not happen in your games, don't get me wrong, but it's a good habit to build up now. I think other players, even like myself, I would get lazy here and go, it's under tower, I'm going to go back, maybe farm the pole camp or something like that. But he says, no, I'm going to stay here, put pressure on this Brew. Even though the Brew still got most of the creeps under tower, the point is that he made him earn it. He forced him to do something to get those creeps. if you play like this in your games, you might be able to deny all the creeps under tower, right? You're forcing the support to stay. You're going to tilt the offlaner, right? Things like this. Again, we see the same thing here. He does an excellent job of baiting Brew in, right? So look, he clicks both these creeps down so that they're low health. And then as soon as Brew walks up, he waveforms backwards to get both of the creeps. I think he actually missed one. But he waveforms backwards, secures a creep, and hits Saberlight with the waveform. It's just such a masterful performance. Now it looks like they're manning up on him to go on him. Again, this is all set up because if Morphling is not playing like this, Boxy doesn't have to be here. But instead, they're both forced to waste a bunch of resources and cooldowns on the Morphling, who can just strength morph. Right? He even strength morphs in. Now watch this. This is one tip that you can apply early in the game and later as well. If you're max strength morphed, your base waveform still does quite a bit of damage. So if you're not threatened, like if you get kicked out of the fight, your team continues fighting, and you're on low strength, and maybe you're not farmed enough to quickly reset yourself, you can stay in the fight on like 200 or 300 health and throw out waveforms. It still does quite a bit of damage. And you saw that here. He didn't keep running. He threw out another waveform with a Saberlight. Now watch this. Again, their spells are on cooldown. They already use them. He knows this. So he morphs down to 1 HP by hitting tons of agi. And then he morphs strength to create more health out of thin air. And then as soon as he's out of vision, right, Ducalis gets the kill on Saberlight because of that extra waveform, right? All these tiny things come together to create this just insane lane dominance. And he's still able to play up here because Brew is dead. And he still has 63 base damage. So he still does plenty of damage to CS and contest creeps. And then as soon as he's safe, this is when he goes to do the full morph. Again, worst players, even myself, would go and regen earlier and let Boxy have all those creeps. But he's forcing Boxy to earn every single creep. And then he does the regen trick, right? Where so int treads so that while you're morphing down, you save mana. And then swap all your stats out. And boom, he's at full heal. He has 92 base damage with agility treads. And he's pretty unkillable. They very solidly won the lane, so I'll probably move on to other laning examples, but I will be coming back to this game for later parts of the video. So here's a laning sequence of multiple of the concepts that I mentioned kind of coming together into one clip. So for starters, I'm almost level 2, and I know that this Lich over here is going to trade with Silencer. So I'm purposely trying to get this creep to hit level 2. There we go. So I hit level 2. And it's that exact 2v1 situation I was mentioning where you'll see like the supports will be trading on the side. And if you just waveform in, get a couple right clicks in, you'll get a kill. And then now I'm at 900 health, right? My attack damage is low. I'm very low on health. And this is where a lot of Morph players might get stuck. But all I do is I start walking all the way back up here. The creeps are going to push into me anyway, so I'm not going to really miss any CS for this. So I'm going to walk all the way up here while morphing all the way down agi. I probably could have started doing this sooner, but then I backpack swap branches. I swap them all into the same item slot. And then I eat a tango and pop a wand. And just like that, I'm at 50% HP, 70 attack damage now. And I only morphed a tiny bit of strength back, right? I'm only morphing enough such that I'm not going to die randomly to one snake. So I'm at 150. I could still die to one snake technically, so I'm playing away from the range creep. And then I have to morph some more strength after Silencer casts spells on me. But you can see I'm doing the same thing constantly. Like, so I'm low here. As soon as the silence goes away, I'm going to go into the bushes. I pop a tango. I'm going to morph all the way down. Pop a wand. And then morph some strength back up and let the tango just heal me up. Again, playing on enough strength so that I'm not dying to like one snake or anything random like that. And I'm kind of putting myself... I should be aggroing here much more, to be clear. And again, you're going to see the exact same thing happen, right? Literally the exact same thing. The Silencer is just not respecting the Morphling. He's coming in from the side of the wave to try to harass me or my Lich. And then my Lich and me just walk at him, waveform on top of him, and it's a free kill. So you want to be constantly looking for situations like that. And then again, backpack swap. And yeah, you can see that's a little sequence of laning events where it's some of those concepts coming together. And there are things I still could have done better there, but you have the abusing stat shift for regen. You have the 2v1ing the support and going in with waveform to get a kill. All right, now that we're this far in the video, we can move past the laning phase and talk about his mid to late game. So the main thing you're trying to do in the mid game after laning phase is play for your first power spike. And your first power spike is usually going to be Manta +1. So whether that be Manta plus Butterfly, Manta plus Pike, Manta plus BKB, or Manta plus Lincolns, you're really trying to not die and dodge fights unless they're really good until you hit a power spike of Manta +1. To do this, you're going to want to do a specific farming pattern that is somewhat unique to Morphling, but really it's just a common carry farming pattern that you should be doing on any carry if possible. So you want to play very aggressively and pressure a lane if you can. This is even more relevant for Morphling because of the fact that he's so slippery with Strength Morph and Waveform. So unless the enemy really has like 2 or 3 forms of hard catch, you can always look at the enemy team and go, okay, what spells do I have to dodge for them to catch me? And if they don't have anything to really catch you, you can play super aggressively. Once you get Manta, you want to cut waves with Manta and go back and forth between the Twin Gate. Manta can really accelerate your farm after you get it if you use it properly. So and then with Waveform, a little tip when you're jungling, you want to try to click the creeps down evenly and then secure them all at once with Waveform if possible. This isn't always possible, but if you can, it can be a pretty quick farm accelerator if you click the creeps down evenly and then Waveform through them into the next camp. So just to illustrate this even more, you're trying to avoid the middle of the map. You're trying to play the edges of the map. The reason being that if you play on the edges of the map, what's going to happen is you're going to force people to defend these lanes. And that's going to open up all kinds of opportunities for you. It might open up a kill potential if a support TP's alone. It's going to make space for other heroes on the map. Remember guys, good carry players don't just make space for themselves. They also make space for their teammates. Somebody told me recently that a lot of people think that pros solo carry the game. And sometimes this is true. But really what they're doing often is they're carrying their teammates with them. They're making plays that give more resources to their team overall. So if you play the edges of the map, you're going to be forcing TPs back, which opens up potential kill opportunities for you. It opens up the chance for, let's say, somebody TPs to defend while a fight's happening in another lane. You can just TP into the fight. And it's going to slow down the pace of the game so that you can hit your big power spikes. If you play towards the middle of the map, what tends to happen is you get pinched. So the enemy collapses on you and you get forced back to your side of the map and you're stuck really awkward, like playing here, playing timid along these camps. And that's the disaster scenario that you want to avoid on Morphling. When you force people to respond to you, you want to TP away to the another lane only when you absolutely have to, right? Like let's say recently I was playing a game and I was pushing bot, I was playing on Radiant and a Necro TP'd here. I didn't immediately TP away because Necro by himself doesn't threaten me. So I sat here, I did this classic farming rotation where I go hard camp, small camp, ancient camp, waves, and I did this back and forth. And every time I'd see Necro, I'd poke at him, right? And this either forces somebody else to come help him, which opens up space on the rest of the map, or I just kind of harass and annoy Necro until I eventually take this tower. Now, one big thing with this is that, guys, if you're playing with a Morphling who's farming like this, or any carry for that matter, and you're a support player, please buy a smoke and tell your team to connect when people rotate. We're going to see this in the Satanic game that I was looking at earlier, but one huge mistake that I see so many people make is that they'll see their carry farming and they'll assume they're just AFK. They don't use the space that they make them, right? If a carry is farming like this, where they're farming well, they're forcing rotations, 2 or 3 heroes are showing to respond to them, what you can do is you can pop a smoke as a team and connect to your carry. This lets him play his optimal farming patterns, and it lets you take advantage of the bad TPs that he forces. All right, so let's watch this in action in this Satanic replay. So right now, he sees Boxy and Nature's Prophet. I guess that would be Skeeter, right? He sees Skeeter and Boxy, so Tusk and Nature's Prophet top. Immediately, he waveforms into the wave. And he starts pushing this tower. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. And he just heavily focuses on this tower, okay? Now it forces Saberlight to come back here instead of fighting with his team. This is why this is so impactful. He's forcing somebody to respond to it, and this makes space for the rest of his team. And then see how no one is connecting to him, right? I don't believe they get a kill on here. He scans the triangle, or somebody scans the triangle to see if there are any other heroes right there. And I don't doubt that they set up this play together. Remember what I was talking about please, if you guys are seeing your carry farm like this, connect to him, right? So no one connects to Morphling from mid and hides behind him in the trees. And I'm assuming After they scanned this, they scanned the triangle, they saw red, they know that there's somebody there. It's probably Nisha on Pango. And so they're kind of baiting him out, right? He has strength morph, and once he gets hit with boat rum from Kunkka, he's basically unkillable. So they just forced Pango ulti for nothing. Liquid gets nothing out of this Pango ulti. And this makes space for his Enigma. This makes space for his supports, right, who are farming mid. I mean, it's just insane the amount of impact that farming like this has. So then he does the exact same thing, right? Notice he doesn't go deeper. Recently, I was really making these mistakes when I was playing poorly, where I'd farm the hard camp, the small camp next to my safe lane, and then I would go a layer deeper back to these deeper camps, and you really don't want to do that. You want to just ping between the ancients, the small camp, and the hard camp. And again, look at this. He's doing the same thing, and the reason he's doing this is because he knows they have no lockdown for him. They have no way to kill him. He's 6k net worth at 11 minutes because of the way he's playing, right? He's waveforming into them under tower. Diving the Tinker under tier 2 11 minutes into the game. Brewmaster comes in and ults. By the way, if you're going to play like this, you do need level 2 morph. So you need to make sure you have level 2 morph before you're doing this. But watch this, dude. They're all on top of him, and 2 of his heroes are now pushing mid. Now, I believe his team connects to him here. Yeah, they do. So he dies, but then immediately after, they set up a double kill onto Nisha and Boxy. Okay, Nisha doesn't die, but they still get a lot of harass damage. And now look at the position that they are on their map. The whole team is now kind of barricading them on their side of the map because of this one play by Morphling where he pushes aggressively and dives them into the tier 2. This is the kind of play that you would see like Twitch chat flame somebody for when it's actually like the absolute best thing you can be doing. So then he just returns to the exact same lane. He TPs. Again, it doesn't matter if he shows TP. They can't really kill him. He's going to continue to pressure this lane. And then his team is smoking into this area of the map that he's holding. He's watching. They're going to set up a kill on Skeeter. Or Mickey, sorry. And you can see all this space that they're creating by playing on this side of the map. And this is all set up by the farming patterns from the carry. Brew uses another ult that they waste. Now, one thing I want you to notice here too, this is kind of leading into the team fight part later. So notice how he gets forced to morph a lot of strength. I mean, still not that much, right? He still has 140 damage. But what he does is, even though he gets forced, now he gets forced to morph more strength, he stays in the fight and he throws out waveforms. Right? So right now he doesn't do like any right click damage, but he's still staying to throw out right clicks and throw out waveforms. If you're not like at immediate risk of dying and your team is still fighting, that's something you absolutely want to do. Because like I said earlier, waveform still does a bit of damage, even if you don't have a lot of attack damage. And so spamming it in fights can be very impactful. So once again, they're just bodying Liquid on this side of the map by playing here. They find a kill on Insania. They farm their ancient stack. Another brew ult used for the Morphling. Notice he's manning up on it because he has Vladimir's and his lifesteal is so high. They get a kill onto Boxy. They X Nisha back. And at this stage of the game, it's really over. Like it's very hard for Liquid to get back into this. So we don't really need to go any further, but I just want you to see how much space you can open up by playing on this side of the map. Now, one thing to note, right, in your pub games, like I just played a game recently on stream that was so enraging where my team would not connect to me. Instead, they would take fights by themselves on other sides of the map. You want to keep in mind that you need to adapt to the game. So if, for example, you're playing Radiant in this situation and they keep sending heroes that can kill you, you don't want to keep going back there and dying. You want to let them force you out. And then if they sent enough heroes that, hey, if I stay, I'm definitely going to die, then you just TP to the opposite side of the map, keep track of the TP cooldowns that they just used on you, and start splitting that lane instead. So just want to be clear about that. You don't want to go and feed, but you want to give your team space in the way that you're playing the game. Okay, so now let's talk about how to teamfight as Morph. This is probably the most asked about topic that I've seen in my comments and in Discord and things like that. And so hopefully I can help bring some clarity to that. The thing about Morphling is there are some basic principles you can adhere to, but there's so much variance depending on the match that you're in about how you should approach each team fight. So I'm just going to talk about some basic points and then just show a bunch of examples of team fights. And hopefully you can start to see patterns emerge. So moving on. So how to team fight. Do not go in first. You are the follow-up damage. So this kind of ties into my last point down here that says preserve your HP. You are the dude who follows up on initiations, on stuns, on things like that. You don't want to be the dude who's going in first. Otherwise, they're going to use all their spells on you. You're going to have to morph strength, and then you're a sad water boy. You want to think about who threatens you and how that affects your initiation. So you constantly want to be thinking about which heroes on the enemy team, if they jump me, I'm either going to die or be forced to morph everything afterwards, and then I'm useless the rest of the fight. And how does that affect my playstyle? You can sometimes be a massive bait. So especially earlier on in the game, when they don't have tons of damage and your team has enough damage, right? Where it's like in the early game, oftentimes you're not the single source of damage that your team has. Like your team can be a source of damage. So you can sometimes be a massive bait. And I'll show a clip of that right now. Okay, so some things to notice about this clip, right? So they go on me here. I start morphing strength. And when I'm not taking damage, I stop strength morphing, right? We're trying to min-max that agi if we can. I hit him with another waveform. Now, long drawn-out fights give me more mana with Wand to cast more charges of waveform than I normally would be able to. Notice how here I waveform in, not away. I still have 400 health. And waveform does a lot of damage. Remember that concept of just because you're high strength doesn't mean you have to stop contributing to the fight. So then as I'm chasing this guy, I start morphing some agi so that I have more damage. I'm not threatened by any spells. I know all their spells are down. And just like that, I bait them into all dying. If you get jumped, look for ways to re-enter the fight if possible. This ties into this next point, which is only morph as much strength as you need to survive in that moment. You're really trying to play on as high damage as possible throughout the fight so that you can go in and re-enter them if you need to. That brings me into my next point, which is how to use morph. It's so tied into how to team fight that I'm going to explain these concepts and then we'll show a bunch of examples of team fights. You want to pick your highest value morph target if available and save morph for them. So early on when I was learning Morphling, I would like morph into the first person I saw if they had a stun or something like that, when there were more high value morphs that I could get if I were patient and waited for them to show up. You don't want to morph when you're low HP in a situation where you could get bursted. So remember, when you're morphed to somebody else, you can't strength morph. So you either need to make sure that you morph into them with enough HP that you can survive getting bursted, or you need to make sure you don't just like panic morph into somebody before you're about to get blasted with spells. You want to switch back and forth between ranged and melee heroes to maximize damage as they're running away. So oftentimes when you morph into a melee hero, they do more damage. So when you're on top of somebody, you'll want to keep hitting in melee form. And then as they start running away, you switch to a ranged form to continue hitting them as they're running away. You want to save waveform and mobility spells for the proper time, and I'll show some examples of what I'm talking about coming up. Okay, so let's take a look at this game right here. So I'm against Lich, Shaman, Razor, Storm, and Dawnbreaker. I know that pretty much the only hero that threatens me in a fight is Razor. The reason being, if I use waveform at a poor time, or I don't have morph up and he static links me, that's basically it. He's going to steal all my damage and kind of neuter me during the fight. So with that being in mind, I need to keep in mind two things. I need to either have waveform up to escape, or I need to save morph for him, which is what I've been doing this whole match because none of the other heroes compare to morphing to Razor and stealing all of his damage. So Storm initiates on us here, and I waveform out while he's BKB'd to save myself from the initial burst. I'm kind of kiting him backwards, and then I morph into him and start static linking him. You can see how quickly I'm able to just take all of his health away. I'm essentially a more powerful version of Razor. Also, the static link stays even when you morph back into your hero, so you continue linking them. And then I morph out here, and I actually misplayed this in a couple ways after the swap out. So I know that Razor doesn't have static link. Dawn doesn't really threaten me. Lich doesn't really threaten me. And Lich threw down Macropyre. So this is just a general like team fighting thing, but I misplayed this really hard. I'm standing here like kind of timid, but they've used their initial burst. Shaman is dead. There's no reason I have to be timid at all. I should probably go this way and stay with my supports, like immediately waveform onto this. Instead, what I do is Dawnbreaker connects onto me and I hex her up and try to kill her. But I've built more control and tank than I have damage really this game, so it doesn't really matter much. I don't kill the Dawn, she just escapes. And one thing I want to say with this is an improper use of waveform, right? She's standing right on top of me. I don't need to waveform there, and it actually costs me the kill, because if I still had waveform there, I could have just stood on top of her, then waveformed onto the high ground with her, with Link continuing to go, and I could have killed her like so easily. Instead, I don't get anybody, And so I do get the Dawn later, but it's still a misplay. And then I kill Lich on dieback. But I have to leave because everyone else is dead. I don't want to make my teammates buy back or anything. And I have to BKB TP because Storm can obviously zap in and just pull me. So that's a little teamfight breakdown for that. Now let's look at another example here. So I'm going to get Slark, AM, Disruptor, Razor, and Gyro. So I have two big threats in this game. One is Anti-Mage and one is Razor. If I go in at the wrong time, Anti-Mage could easily burn all my mana and screw me up. Same thing with Razor. If I go in at the wrong time and I don't have Morph and he links me, then I'm going to lose all my damage. And he can run me down because he's a lot of physical magic mix, which goes through my armor. So I TP into this fight because it's happening close to my tier 2. And I see that Anti-Mage gets rotted with Cataclysm. So he's probably dead. He dies. And so I waveform in. I know Slark is on low HP. And immediately I see Razor show up and I morph into him with Link. And I just run him down. Tries to BKB, but it's not going to do anything to help him. And the Slark is low HP. I don't really need to worry about anything there. And we get the kill on Slark as well. Also, Slark didn't have Diffusal this game, so I'm not that worried about him. But you can see how I kind of went down the list, right? AM is good. Don't have to worry about him anymore, so I can jump in aggressively. I'm still saving more for Razor. Yep, Razor shows up. I link him and I run him down. And this is why saying like one hero counters another is, to a point, kind of useless, because nobody plays the counters well or even close to perfectly below really high MMR. So if you're super patient, normally they will screw up like they just did here, and you can clean up afterwards. So another later clip here from that same game. So exact same concept, right? I know that Razor is like my only threat, so I'm just sticking on him. He's their carry, he's their damage dealer. I need to protect my backlines. So I link him up, get a rapier delivered to me on the courier, good stuff. And I'm going backwards. I mean, that is where all their heroes are, but I'm also just trying to protect my backlines. Get the kill there. It's fairly easy team fight, especially with a rapier. All right, let's look at another team fight here. So my Outworld is dying. I waveform in and I morph into Nature's Prophet. Why? Because I know that in a 1v1, he doesn't have Satanic. I will win a 1v1, 100%. I morph into him and I sprout him. He doesn't have any tools to escape sprout. And I just hit him down. He sprouts me, so it actually kind of keeps me safe a little bit. And then this is why it's so nice to morph into Prophet, because I just TP to mid and immediately start pressuring it after we won the fight. And I get an Ironwind Tree on to help me push. So here's kind of a backwards way to win a team fight. You know what we were talking about baiting heroes out. So this Legion has been aggressively hunting me all game. And I know that for a fact. She's literally like, it's her sole goal in this game to hunt me down and duel me. So watch what happens here. This clip looks like cheating, but I swear I was just staring at the minimap because I know the LC's nearby. I know she has a Shadow Blade, and I know there's a sentry up on this hill. So I go in, I'm watching the minimap. I see her pop up on my minimap for a split second right there. And I immediately start strength morphing. And essentially that means that we don't win the duel, but she doesn't kill me. We kill her. And that wins us the team fight pretty much. Here's another example. Okay, so they go on my team at this outpost here. I'm against TA and Spirit Breaker. Two fantastic morphs, but Spirit Breaker probably trumps the other two, especially because Pudge and Lion and Mars have stuns. And if I morph and get Bulldoze from Spirit Breaker, I'm basically unkillable. So I TP in here. As soon as I know that Spirit Breaker's there, I TP in. Unfortunately, I get my charge canceled, but I'm Bulldoze, so I have huge dash resistance. And I man up with the melee form when they're close to me because I have a bash. You'll notice that like most melee heroes have some sort of really important melee spell that you want to abuse when you're close to them if you can, right? So like Spirit Breaker has bash. Monkey King has Jingu. Ursa has Fury Swipes. All these things that you can stack up really fast when you're melee form. And then when they start to run away, you can switch back to ranged. And then I'm still morphed to Spirit Breaker, so I'm able to charge in on this Mars. And I know I'm so strong right now. I can just continue going in. I have Bulldoze, I have Spirit Breaker morph, and I get the Ultra Kill. Unfortunately, I don't get the Rampage here. They go back to base, but that's the power of a Spirit Breaker morph for Morphling. Okay, so another game, another example. So this is actually later in the same game. It looks like I'm against Anti-Mage and Razor, so the same threats exist. Razor's locked down, and I know he's used Static Link, so I'm more worried about Anti-Mage. I'm waiting to see him go in. I also know that now that Razor's dead, AM is my best morph, so I wait to see till he goes in, and I wait for him out of the bushes and morph him before he can react. Get a nice stun from Jakiro. Very important BKB usage, because I don't want Disruptor to cancel my me being able to hit this AM and kill him here, and I don't want AM to burn the rest of my mana, because he can do that quickly with his illusions, and that ensures that I get this kill. I get the double, and then Slark for some reason goes in after and tries to kill me. Don't know why. And I just stay on him with AM form to burn all his mana away. So remember, in melee range, hitting with melee. And same concept, right? Anti-Mage is a melee hero. He has an extra spell that you make use of when you're in melee form, and you always want to try to abuse that. There's nothing really to break down with this clip, just showing you the strength of morphing his Outworld. So he imprisons me. I just click him down. And then this Drow has Aegis, so I Manta the Gust to get on top of her, and then I Astral the Crystal so that she can't interfere with me killing Drow. And then I just stand on top of her. Axe and I kill her easy with the Outworld Morph. Another different game where I have two strong morph targets. I have Anti-Mage and I have Monkey King. Two really strong morph targets. I went Daedalus this game because I had an Aegis and I really wanted to greed for it. You can close out a fight so easy if they make one misstep because of this Daedalus. So I'm waiting for AM. Again, he's committed on my team. He's not thinking about me, right? He's not thinking about me even though he should be. I morph into AM. And I 3-shot the line. And then Anti-Mage blinks onto me for some reason. And then I 3-shot him as well with the Daedalus. And then they do Vessel me and stand on top of me with Gyro Rockets. So I do have to back out and reset for a second or I would have died. Here's a team fight example. Axe lands a good call on the Clinks. And I know my job, right, is follow-up damage. So I waveform in. We kill the Clinks easily. He buys back. And yeah, I know because I have Aegis, if we kill their carry, it's worth it for me to all in and lose Aegis like this. Now, Storm and Dusa are going on my team, and so I know that I need to deal with the back lines, right? If I stay up at the front, they're going to continue controlling us, poking us, so I need to go on the back line. So I'm kind of ignoring the front line thing, and I morph into Shaman because I know that he needs to die, right? Looking at their team, he's the only one who can prevent me from just killing their whole team because of his stun. So he needs to die. So I morph into him for the extra lockdown, right? Because they're running away from me. And if I can get an opportunity to lock them down, it's going to help me secure all these kills. So we're able to kill that. Then Clinks comes in and dies back. And then I'm able to chase down the Medusa and get an ultra kill here as well. Now this wouldn't have happened if I continued going in the front lines, probably, because they would have just controlled me a bunch, chipped me down for all my health and stuff like that. So you really need to kind of go by systematically in team fights, like process of elimination. Like, okay, these people are dead. Who's my next threat, right? And just kind of pick them off one at a time. So here's an example of some team fighting with Morphling about that concept I'm talking about just knowing the most high value morph at any given situation. And that just comes down to a lot of like matchup and skill knowledge and a lot of practice. But so watch this here. My guy's getting picked. I know that Troll has no way to escape a Sprout. Tiny has no BKB. So I morph into Prophet. I Sprout Troll. And then while that's happening, I click everybody else down. And so that little window of time, Troll wasted BKB and ult. This is kind of his fault too. He didn't really have to BKB or ult like that. But that little window of time from that one Sprout actually won us that fight. Paired with Warlock. So that's one example of a Morphling team fight. Here's an example of how Morph can counter Anti-Mage if you play around him properly, and an example of a very bad TP at the end of this. So I have my Sand King nearby. I'm purposely telling him, hey, we should wait here and see if AM comes. He just got Aegis, and sure enough, he does TP bot. And he immediately books it for me. So I waveform away. It's very important. If he gets on top of me and burns my mana away, the fight is over. The fight is totally over. But instead I waveform backwards, kite him away. As soon as I see him, I morph into him. And then I blink away again, right? Because my Sand King is all the way down here. He's not going to be able to connect to me easily. So I'm trying to get Anti-Mage to follow me into a place where my Sand King can connect. So I bring him down here. He blinks on the low ground. I'm hoping he'll come back. Sure enough, he does. Sand King charges up Bolt. I burn all of his mana and we kill him. Now watch what happens next. He blinks away. I blink after him. And just stay on top of him. And sure enough, we get the kill and get 1,000 gold. Now, what is my best move here? I want you to think about it for a second. Pause the video. Think about it for a second. My best move right now, I see a fight happening mid. And keep in mind, what do you think the best play is? And I'll show you what I actually did. Okay, so I wasn't able to do anything there because I have no resources, right? I had two real options. One of them is just continue to push bot because I don't have resources to help this fight mid. The other one is to TP back to base and fill up on resources and then come to this fight, and I think that's the move that I should have made. If I instantly TP'd base after this engagement and didn't hesitate, I would have been out and down here to help with this fight in time with full resources. So when something like this happens, you really have two main options. You either need to go back and reset your resources or you push bot. Honestly, I probably would have preferred to push bot if the Spirit Breaker hadn't TP'd here to help his anti-mage because I was low on resources and he can probably kill me. If he's smart, he'll just keep poking my health away, running backwards, poking my health away, bashing me, and making it so that I can't TP base until I'm just stuck on this side of the map with no TP, or he gets a teammate or something like that. So my best play, considering the Spirit Breaker TP to stop me, is TP base, refill on resources, waveform out, and connect to this fight. This is really an example of how decisive you need to be on Morphling because I just wasted so much time here. Like I got this 1,000 gold kill and I could have snowballed that into an even better lead and we ended up losing this game because of some misplays like this that I made throughout the game. So you really want to be decisive with Morphling. If you're not and you're not farming properly, you screw up some fights, you TP somewhere where you shouldn't and you don't have resources and you're stuck on one side of the map, it feels really bad. You fall behind so quickly. So, all right, so here's another quick example of a team fight. I just saw Outworld showing on this wave hitting it. I know he's right here. And I know that if I get on top of this guy, I can pick him off easily. So I waveform in, morph into him, and hit him 3 times, and he dies. Now, I do make another mistake here. I really have a hard time. I don't know if it's my ADHD or what, but I have a really hard time focusing on some of these micro things. It's like I can only go into a match and focus on like 3 specific things and other important stuff I need to do just for some reason I just completely forget about. But like this game, right? I'm against the Spirit Breaker. He's mostly magic damage. He's very farmed. He can easily kill me here. So watch what happens. Boom, I get crashed into. Literally the root canceled his attack that would have killed me. And Oracle's able to get ult off. That's how close this was. But you can see the strength of the Outworld Morph, obviously. And in lower ranked games, people will not respect this kind of thing. So if you see an opportunity to easily jump in on somebody, even in a team fight, to morph something like an Outworld or a Viper, an Anti-Mage or a Spirit Breaker, do it. You can just tear a fight to pieces. Another example of a team fight in that same match. So again, I see Outworld showing on this wave. And once again, I'm gunning for that strength morph. I have a shield rune, so it's why I'm still playing on this low HP again, but I probably should still be playing on a bit higher HP than what I am. It's just unnecessarily greedy to play on this low health when you still have so much damage, even if I give myself like 30, 40 more strength. So I go in and I morph into Outworld. Now this is a misplay of waveform. So let me go ahead and rewind this here. It's actually a misplay of waveform. Here's why. I'm smoked. He's starting to walk back towards me and my smoke is not broken. So this waveform is actually very unnecessary. And I know he has a Hurricane Pike, so he's able to just Hurricane Pike away from me afterwards. And it makes this less effective than it otherwise could have been. So pretty big misplay there by me. And they do control me up quite a bit. But you can see how much damage I'm able to pump out in these fights. Simply because of the Outworld Morph. And now this is honestly a pretty bad fight for me, but you can still learn a lot from bad fights. So I'm able to kill this guy. And then I BKB unnecessarily. Like, this is so unnecessary. This is just a low HP Jakiro who whiffs Ice Wall. And I was anticipating the Ice Wall so that I wouldn't get stunned and I could finish killing him. But it's still not necessary to do that. I should have saved it for what happens after this. So then I waveform in. I don't have a BKB. I know my team is still behind me. Good route by the Oracle. And then I'm basically staying in Outworld form as long as I possibly can. And then I immediately morph back and I start strength shifting. And you can see they're going to try to kill me here because they think they can kill me. But this is where the tankiness of Morphling comes into play. We're able to kill the AM. And then I'm able to morph back into Outworld. And even though I am playing on so much strength, the Arcane Orb does so much damage with the attack speed. So I'm able to secure this kill as well. So that wasn't really a great team fight from me, but there's still a lot to be learned from bad team fights. So, okay, so this isn't exactly a team fight example, but I just wanted to make sure that I covered this. When you have Aegis on Morphling, you want to make sure that you either don't strength morph too much before you pop Aegis, or you just go ahead and reset your health before you die. The reason being that if you are super strength morphed and you die with Aegis, when you respawn, you're not going to be able to do any damage. So if we watch this clip here, he gets lasered again, drops down to 100 HP, and then they kind of reset. And then he goes max Agi, and then he's able to just lifesteal a bit just by hitting creeps. And this is super important to do so that you don't just totally whiff Aegis. This could easily cost games, so be sure to be aware of this. Okay, so really quick, I want to talk about some more advanced itemization stuff. So Morphling's items are honestly pretty darn flexible. Later on in the game, you can go a bunch of different items depending on what you need. You can go dataless. One thing that I've done to pretty good success in my games is if I get an Aegis, like let's say my items I have are Vlad's Manta Butterfly, and then I pick up an Aegis. Sometimes, if I didn't pick up the Aegis, in almost all those scenarios, I would be going a BKB next item. But instead, what I can do is because I have an Aegis, I can buy a Daedalus instead. Now, to be clear, I wouldn't recommend this for most people. For most people, especially if you're learning the hero, I would say just get the BKB. This has to do with a bigger concept that I'm slowly teasing out and learning in my games, and that is that sometimes there are small windows where you can actually go the greedy item to finish the game off. And I think when you get Aegis is one of those. Like you saw in that clip earlier where I got Daedalus against Anti-Mage, they screwed up one fight and I was able to just wipe the floor with everybody because they stepped out of position once because I had the Daedalus. Nullifier can be good if you're against lots of Yules, Force Staffs, things like this, and you keep getting kited and you really need to just blow somebody up, or you're against like a Necro, like a spell you need to dispel. Nullifier can be really, really strong. Silver Edge, this is very niche, but I recently figured out from a higher MMR player when to go this item, and I'm actually just going to play the clip of me talking through it right now. Because my main problem in this game is AA, and the guy, the high MMR player in the chat, he wanted me to actually get Silver Edge instead because he said the Butterfly doesn't do a lot for you. The Silver Edge will let you jump supports in the back line, and it also contributes something to the game that I haven't even thought about before, and that's what he calls fear factor. And fear factor is if I get a Silver Edge, now they have to make sure they're playing with sentries. Now they have to make sure they're playing with dust. And the AA is much more afraid about where he positions, and that gives me some leeway in the match. On top of that, it makes this dynamic of they don't have any real catch for me so much worse. Because now I can cut waves and then run invis to mid and bounce back and forth and just make their game a complete living hell. But this Butterfly does absolutely nothing to address the main problem in this match for me, which is the AA. So I really only thought that Silver Edge was for breaks. I thought that only like, oh, it's low skill to try to get a jump with invis. But that's not the case. That's not the case. What he's telling me, an 11k MMR player is telling me is like, no, Silver Edge is really good in these games where you need to jump the backlines and create fear and kind of disrupt their position, if that makes sense, in the back. Bloodthorn can be really good. Like some games, you'll be against a team comp where none of your heroes will build Orchid, but it's a very good Orchid game, and the enemy won't suspect it. So like sometimes I'll be up against a Puck or an Ember or something like that. None of my heroes build it, so they build greedy items. They skip Yules, they skip BKB, and I go, oh, if I get a quick Orchid here and we take a fight, that could turn the whole tide of the game. So Bloodthorn can be very strong. Scotty is obviously still a really good Morphling item. Great against range carries, great for anti-regen. In its current state, Butter still beats ranged carries early for many reasons, because you can morph into them and you become a ranged version of them with Butterfly. So you wouldn't want to go Eye of Scotty instead of Butterfly, but especially with the changes they made in 7.39 to Eye of Scotty, I can see this being a really powerful Morphling item. AC is very good if you go into the late game against specifically Drow Ranger. There have been a couple games where I do get AC against Drow because her ult pierces base armor, and so you need that extra armor to stop yourself from just dying straight up in every single fight. Scythe can be good if your team lacks lockdown. You saw a clip where I was building Scythe in that game. Revenant Spooch is good against high armor targets. I'm not going to tell you exactly where. Just watch the BSJ video where he dives into the nitty-gritty math on it. MKB obviously is viable if you're against some sort of evasion. There's some games where they have nothing that you'd want to dispel, and SNY is actually the better move. It gives you status resistance, and you just want to resist those stuns. There have been some games where I've won pretty convincingly with SNY because it gives you more health and status resistance against these single target stuns that you don't really need to, or you're not even able to dispel. All right, so real quick, we have a quick and dirty morph tier list. So in trash, we have heroes that their spells don't do anything for Morphling. They're spellcasters that Morphling doesn't want to use all his mana on, or they have some sort of other gimmick that makes them unplayable. So Visage relies on his birds too much. Very, very bad. Kez relies on his ultimates quite a bit. Very bad. Storm Spirit without ultimate is just a squishy creep. Tinker without ultimate, obviously very bad. Necro just doesn't do enough for you, and you don't want to sit there as a weak Necro in Morph form with low agi. Your health pool will be too small and just doesn't offer enough. Lycan relies too much on his ultimate, and once you summon wolves and morph back, the wolves will leave, but he has basically no move speed. So you're just turning into an immobile hero that needs mobility. Death Prophet, again, a spell spammer. I think this one could be situational because of the silence, but it's one of the worst ones. Ember Spirit, no remnants. Enigma, again, just not the kind of hero that Morph wants to morph into. Clinks with no ultimate, very, very weak. He can't get away or escape anything. Doom, again, relies on his ultimate. Devour, Infernal Blade, and Scorched Earth really don't do enough to warrant Morphling using them. Meepo with no ultimate, very bad. Broodmother, the webs go away once you morph back. And again, this is a hero that relies on ult for spiderlings. Bounty Hunter, very bad. All you can do is spam spells that cost a lot of mana and go invis. I think this is like somewhat situational, but still really bad. Huskar will remove your mana pool when you morph into him, as we talked about. Chen, for obvious reasons, don't do this. Any creeps you convert will go away when you morph. Centaur, turning to a low HP Centaur is very bad. I would put this actually in decent / pickoff tier maybe, just simply for the stun, but that's it. Arc Warden, again, relies super heavily on his ultimate. His spells aren't really that strong in a fight on their own to warrant morphing into this guy. There's almost always going to be a better morph. We have IO. Again, you need to be the one doing the damage. You don't want to be linking to your teammates in a fight. Bat Rider, a spell spammer that, just awful hero for Morphling. Beastmaster, another spell hero, relies on summons, and the summons go away once you morph back. So that's the trash tier. For situational, we have Clockwork, right? Cogs could be situationally useful. Techies, the stun and the disarm could be useful if you're clever with it. You could morph into Techies, use the taser to disarm people attacking you that don't have BKB, and then hit them in your morph form. Hoodwink, situational, again, she has a stun. She can run away, so you could use this to escape or to stun. Shadow Demon, situational, you could make illusions of an important hero on your team or to save a teammate. Situational because he has an escape on Void Spirit. Treant Protector, situational because he can heal towers and he can escape in the trees, so this is situational. Ringmaster, a situational save. Marcy, situational stun and a little bit of lifesteal, but again, you can't use her ultimate, so it's kind of bad. Warlock, you get a clutch fatal bonds off, but it's nothing crazy. Venomancer, the slow and the plague wards could be clutch if you use them properly, but it doesn't offer too much. Pugna, very situational. If you steal the Nether Ward and keep it alive, could be very strong. Sand King, no ultimate. And as Morphling, you're going to kind of be going like in and out of the fights, so you don't really want to be sitting in one place with Sandstorm. Sven, situationally good. He has a stun and a war cry, but without God's strength, it's not like you're going to be hitting people as Sven. Primal Beast, I say situational because you can activate Trample and then Waveform to do a lot of damage really fast, and he has a stun that you could also use as an escape. So I'll say situational. Rubik, this all depends on the spells that he's stolen, but he is a stun. So there is that. Undying, sometimes you could steal a clutch Tombstone, very strong. Wraith King, again, just simply a stun. There's not much else to it. Winter Wyvern, situationally a save, or you can use the Arctic Burn is actually pretty decent on Morphling, but it has a long cooldown, and I would mainly only use it to pump out a little bit of damage, then morph back to the rest of my hero. But there's probably going to be better morphs for you, but situationally it's good. Troll Warlord situationally good because of the mischances from Whirling Axes could be very strong against particular carries. Timber situational, but it's actually pretty good in games where there's a Timber, which would be the only way you'd be able to morph into him. So it's decent because Whirling Death counters Timber because it removes strength and it gives you some mobility. I would actually put this in one tier above, so in decent / pick-off tier. Riki, very situational. He has a silence. That's about it. Without invis, he's kind of weak. Tricks of the Trade and Blink Strike could be used as good escapes for sure, but overall, it's not a hero that you're going to want to be morphing into, I would say. Omni Knight. Omni Knight is situationally good because you could give your teammates like a clutch save or something, but other than that, not much. Phoenix is situational because the Icarus Dive could be used as an escape, and the Fire Spirits could be used to slow a carrier's attack speed and then kill them. Phantom Lancer situational for the escape. Oracle situational for the save. Night Stalker situational for the extra move speed if it's nighttime, and the silence could be good. Mirana situational for the escape. Medusa situational for the split shot, and the mana shield is decent. Lone Druid, it's very bad because the bear will go away when you morph back, but with that being said, there are situations I can see in which summoning a bear and rooting somebody constantly would be very strong. So situational on Lesh, because he has a stun, and his Diabolic Edict is fairly strong in very specific situations, but again, he's a caster and you don't want to burn your entire mana pool as Lesh. Lich situational for the Frost Armor, the Sinister Gaze stun, and the nuke. Coddle situational for the mana. Grim situational for the silence. Jakiro situational for the stun. Earth Spirit situational for the silence and stun that you get from Remnant and Grasp. Lena situational for the stun and the nuke. Darkseer situational for Ion Shell and Surge. Legion Commander I think could be very strong in certain situations because of the counterattack. So if you're morphing somebody as Morphling, you want to ideally have some form of sustain, and she does with counterattack. So in very specific melee on melee situations, I can see this being good. Dazzle situational for the save. Bloodseeker situational for the sudden burst of move speed if they're all low, and the silence could be good. Abaddon for the save. Magnus for the potential pickoff. Moving on, we have Kunkka, situationally good for the X into the stun. So if somebody's TPing away, you could morph into Kunkka, X them back real quick. Invoker, situationally good for maybe like a Sunstrike Snipe or for the control that he offers. Brewmaster, situationally good for the stance shifting, potentially for evasion and armor and things like that. He also has a decent slow with his Thunderclap that does decent damage, but overall not that great, and you're going to have to understand how to play Brew with his stances, which a lot of people won't. Elder Titan, I can see this one being situationally good if he has like a high armor ally on his team that you can reduce the armor with natural order and man up on him. If you morph back in your main hero, however, all the natural order that you've built up will go away. So you kind of have to really commit to it, which is really dangerous. Morphling usually takes a lot of damage in fights, needs to be morphing back and forth, morphing strength, things like that. Situational on AA for the slow and the stun. Situational on Ench. I think Impetus could be really broken, but it costs so much of your mana pool. So I think situationally, it's a very good thing, but it's going to take a lot of your mana pool, and you really have to make sure that you're not going to need that mana after. And so I think a lot of players will overestimate how good this is. I would morph into her if it's like we were picking somebody off and we needed extra damage and I was at a distance. Like there's so many factors that need to go into it. Bane, situationally good for a save or a setup for a pickoff. Then we have the decent / pickoff tier. We have Dawnbreaker because she has a stun, she has a slow, and her luminosity heals, which makes it so that you could theoretically man up better with a Dawnbreaker as a morph than you could some of these other heroes, because you're going to be proccing that so quick, right? It's 4th hit heals, and as a morph with lots of agility and like let's say a butterfly, you're going to heal a lot. Tusk, situationally good with the snowball save, the shard to disrupt positioning, and the tag team increases your damage. Skywrath, very good hero lots of times. Like Skywrath counters himself, so it's very good to morph into him sometimes, silence him, and then blow him up with Waveform and Adaptive Strike and Concussive Shot. It's also good to silence other heroes that hate it, so it's situationally good. Windranger, pretty decent. She has a really long stun, a really good nuke, and obviously the wind run is very powerful. You can wind run, morph back in your hero, you're still wind ran, and you get 100% evasion. That's pretty good. Tide, decent for the slow and the anchor smash. If you're against melee carries, There are certain scenarios where morphing into Tide and Anchor Smashing could help you out a lot. Spectre, only reason I'm putting her in decent is because she does a ton of damage with Desolate. And so there are cases where you could, let's say, morph into a Spectre, morph back into Morphling, waveform on top of somebody, morph back into Spectre and use Manta if the person's stunned by one of your teammates and just shred them to pieces with Desolate because you'll be attacking so fast. You could also technically Roche with her very quick if you morph into her, kill her in the fight, and then use Manta and Desolate Roche. So I think it's decent. Venge, just a stun and minus armor, just very powerful all around. Also, the Vengeance aura is very strong on you because you're going to keep your base stats, and that will amplify that quite a bit. Zeus, very decent. He has a mobility spell and lots of low cooldown nukes and stuns. Silencer, very good to spam arcane glaives in certain situations, as well as just throwing out arcane curse and last word to silence key targets can be very strong. Shaman, again, very decent, but you have to be really careful to committing to the shackles because normally you want to be the one who's dealing the damage, right? Like ideally the shaman is on your team, you're following up to finish off the target. So you have to be careful. Like Morph normally doesn't want to sit still in a fight and just do a full duration shackle. So situationally good. Nyx for the stun, the Carapace, and the mana burn, all those could be really strong in the right situations. Tiny, very, very strong if you morph into them to like, you effectively have a blink to do the good toss avalanche combo. You also have a very high attack speed if you grab tree. So those could be very powerful in the right scenarios. You can morph into Tiny, waveform top of a support, do the toss avalanche combo. Puck, pretty good. Counters himself in quite a bit of games. Sometimes you can get a sneaky kill early by leveling Morph early in a fight, silencing him before he has Yules, and your teammate can simply kill him. Firestorm and Pit are both very good spells. Pit is a stun, obviously, and then Firestorm just does a lot of damage. And Firestorm counters Underlord because it does percent HP, and it's also good against other strength heroes, so I think in certain situations it's very good. Naga for the situational net. If you're Morphling and you net somebody and summon illusions plus Manta, you will shred them to pieces. Snapfire has really good nukes, stuns, and a minus armor ability. I think it's very value on Morphling. Disruptor. Glimpse is just an OP spell. That's the only reason he's here. Mars, very decent with the stun and the shield bash, but mainly you're only going to use this guy for pickoffs. I'd actually probably put him a bit lower to be real. Lion has mana drain and Earth Spike and Hex, so tons of disables. Lion is a great target to morph into. Dark Willow has a root and an area control ability, as well as an escape and a stun. So all things that Morphling likes quite a bit. Chaos Knight, very strong stun, very strong spell in Reality Rift because it reduces armor. Crystal Maiden, situationally decent. Frostbite is one heck of a good spell. Bristle, morphing into Bristle and spamming people with goo can help amplify your damage quite a bit. Alchemist, situationally decent. I'd probably only do this if I was picking somebody off, right, where I morph into him and then spray acid spray, jump on top of him, switch into Alch, and hit him a bunch to build up the minus status resistance from his passive. Otherwise, pretty weak. Axe can be very good. The reason this one can be very good is you can waveform in to call somebody, and then you can attack them while you're counter helixing, and you attack very fast and have a lot of damage because remember, you're Axe, but your base attribute is still agility. You're just Morphling, but with Axe's abilities. Dragonite, very strong stun and breathe fire can be pretty good against certain carries, so I put him in decent. Next up, we have very strong, and if you notice a pattern, it's going to be heroes that either have an on-hit spell or are carries, because basically Morphling turning into another carry usually is just a souped up version of that carry with less health. It's very, very powerful. So Muerta with the Gunslinger can just decimate fights, and the Calling is a broken spell, so you can throw down a silence to protect yourself and then sit there and shoot people with Gunslinger. Pengo with the Shield Crash and the Swashbuckle gives Morphling quite a bit of sustain and escape. Very strong. Witch Doctor, this is just for the Maledict. You can Maledict to carry that you're manning up on, then hit him a couple times, and he almost guaranteed dies because of your damage. It's also just a really good spell to throw out in team fights. Weaver, you have the minus armor from bugs, you have the extra mobility, which is just so powerful on Morph, and you have the double attack, which again, very powerful on Morph. Sakuchi, all good stuff. Slardar, if you morph into a Slardar with Morphling's attack speed, you're going to permabash whoever you sit on, so that's really strong. Sniper, super strong. You can morph into Sniper, activate a take aim, and just rapid fire perma-slow somebody because your attack speed is going to be so much higher than a sniper's normally would be. Terrorblade, the reflection is a very powerful spell in the right matchups. And if you do find the right time to summon illusions and tank and man up with meta, it's ridiculously powerful. Templar Assassin, bonus attack range, minus armor, and protection from damage instances, just straight up broken on Morphling. Slark, you have the Pounce, you have Essence Shift, which you stack up faster because of your fast attack speed, and you have a Dispel, which is so overpowered on Morphling. Ursa, the overpower is just too strong on him. You activate it, and then you have a bunch of ranged attacks that attack really, really fast. You can also, if you're manning up in Ursa form, you can build Fury Swipes super fast. Shadow Fiend, very good for the minus armor. Sometimes you can morph into this guy. Again, as long as you are manning up at the proper times, you're essentially just your normal Morphling without waveform, but with a ton of minus armor, which is very strong. Pudge, this one's really hit or miss, but the hook can be super OP in certain fights, right? Like you morph into their Pudge and hook somebody high ground, and then that's the game-winning pick, things like that. Mobility heroes, so this is simply for the Quap Blink and the Slow. Morphling loves an extra mobility spell. It's just straight up broken on him. Ogre for the Bloodlust and the Stun. Bloodlust on Morphling just jacks his attack speed through the roof. Monkey King, you could man up on Monkey King as Monkey King, and you just have an insane damage and lifesteal steroid with Jingu, very strong. Luna, if you find the right time to activate Manta and attack, your very fast attack speed plus glaives can just shred through a whole bunch of people in a team fight. Nature's Prophet, the Sprout can be situationally super strong. He has a pretty good attack range and attack time as is, and the Teleport can be incredibly powerful. You can use it to rat some games. You can use it to immediately TP to a lane and push it after winning a team fight. The potential is really limitless here. Lifestealer, he just has spell immunity, very strong on Morphling. You can activate Rage, then pop back into Morphling, and you have Rage for 5 seconds. Gyro, Flat Cannon. Morph into Gyro, steal Flat Cannon, shoot people in the fights. Fairly self-explanatory. Razor counters himself. You can also morph into Razor and static link somebody else, like another carry in the game perhaps, but usually you're going to static link Razor and make him cry. You have all the spells to stay on top of him. There's no way he's going to escape Link, whereas you can escape Link with Waveform, whereas he can't escape Link against you. Earthshaker, the Enchant Totem, makes you hit for like 1500 damage later in the game in one hit, just super busted. And the Fissure Stun is obviously so strong. Faceless Void, again, we have on-hit effects plus time dilation plus a mobility spell. Just such a good morph. Juggernaut, we have spell immunity, crit, and a healing ward. Very strong on Morphling. Phantom Assassin. This helps you easily close the gap between people in fights. So you can morph into PA, blink onto somebody, hit them with PA, and then as they're running away from you, you morph into Morphling to continue getting ranged hits on them. And then you can just continue doing that over and over throughout the fight. Drow Ranger, Frost Arrows, and Multi-Shot are both very strong abilities. And then in the Rampage tier, we have Viper. When you morph into Viper, you're going to get his Poison Burst innate, which is usually what people run. The amount of damage you can dish out with this because your attack speed is absolutely imba. Spirit Breaker is an imba morph for obvious reasons. You can morph into Spirit Breaker and charge the backlines and stun people, like literally perma-stun people with Manta. And the Bulldoze status resistance is overpowered on Morphling. Stuns just don't last on you. Silences don't last on you unless they have a Yules. Just a completely broken hero for Morphling. Outworld Destroyer, you morph into him and steal Arcane Orb plus Astral Imprisonment. And you just hit people with Arcane Orb with your attack speed. It's completely broken. And then Anti-Mage, again, with your attack speed, you can basically blink on somebody and steal all their mana in under like a second and a half. And he has an extra mobility spell for Morphling, which Morphling absolutely loves. So that's my quick and dirty morph tier list for every hero in Dota. All right, if you enjoyed that video, be sure to drop a like and a sub. I stream on this channel all the time. I also am planning on making some more videos like this. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.